The following podcast contains adult language and themes, so don't say we didn't fucking warn you.
You're listening to SarahTalk. It's political.
Whatever the condition is in their home country is so bad that they're willing to go through that long, arduous trek to get here, where we've promised this American dream idea. The least we could do is when they knock on our door or help them.
Critical.
When was the last time a Christian was allowed to have a separate place to say their prayers? Look, you can literally bow your head at your fucking desk. You're like, why did he get the thing and I didn't get the thing? You didn't ask for the thing!
And positively LGBT positive.
Look, and whenever there's someone coming after my community, they are either wearing a MAGA hat, carrying a Bible, or more often both.
Oh, and occasionally completely absurd.
What the hell is in Idaho?
Potatoes.
Anyway? You could take a drill a
Drill
hole in a potato and fuck a potato.
Fine.
Would you marry a potato though? Could that be okay?
No, but you wouldn't have to marry a potato because a potato doesn't need consent for you to fuck it.
And now, from Haines City, Florida, your host, Sarah Austin.
Hey everybody, welcome to SarahTalk. This is episode 165 on May 11th, 2019, and I am 40 years old now. And you'll notice the emptiness in the room next to me. Becca is deathly ill. I think she's going to need to go see the doctor either Monday or sooner. So she's sitting out the show tonight, sleeping out the show tonight. Hopefully she's getting some rest. And so, filling in at the last minute, we have David Williamson, who's a director with the Central Florida Freethought Community. David, thanks for jumping in at the last minute here.
Hey, you bet. I will do my best, Becca.
All right. So we have some news stories to talk about tonight, and I have a pissed off rant. But before we get into all of that, let's and I do want to get an update on the invocation issues in Winter Garden. But before we get into that, let's talk about who David Williamson is and sort of how you got involved in the movement.
Yeah, sure. And I guess I forgot to say, I hope Becca's feeling well. Hopefully she's not listening live, and when she hears this, she's better. About 10 years ago, coming up on 10 years ago, I was recently separated and getting divorced and looking for a social life because, sometimes wedding or marriages can wrap you up so much that you don't have one, and that's where I was, and started the Suncoast Skeptics down in Sarasota, which is still going strong. Shout out to Dave Nichols and everybody down in Sarasota. And then an atheist group there as well, and kind of moved from scientific skepticism to separation of church and state as an area that I care so much about that I often lose sleep at night over it. So when I met my wife online on okcupid.com, great place to do that, I moved up to the Orlando area. My wife Jocelyn and I have been married since 2013, and they weren't doing any separation of state and church up here, so we decided to take a run at it and started a Freedom from Religion Foundation chapter. And we've got a board of directors of 6 people, about 6 years under our belt now, 6.5 years under our belt now, and a lot of stuff going on. So maybe we can talk about some of that as we go ahead.
Yeah, absolutely. And I said this to Joseph, was it last week or the week before we talked to him? I'm very thankful to you all for the help that you've given us, the mentorship, and just all of the information sharing. I've commented before, like that's one of the things that I've found in the atheist community in the movement is that we are all very free with our our experiences and our best practices, and hey, you need to know how to set this up. I've got you, and I think that's something that we need to pat ourselves on the back for as a community for being so helpful in helping each other set up a group. You want to set up a group, fine, let's do it. I'll give you the information that you need to do it, and so I thank you for that.
Yeah, that comes with the passion for doing things right by our own community, building communities with other people, and I'm really glad to see you and the team there in Polk County starting up. So we're glad to help, and you're doing a lot of the right things, and you've got a good platform here to get launched from. So
yeah, it's exciting stuff for sure. Okay, so we talked about the secular invocations with Joseph, and since then, you were at the Winter Garden Commission meeting, and they were sort of, I guess, added at the last minute onto the agenda that, yes, we are going to roll out and vote on a proposed change to the invocation process. And then you all were there and had been planned to be there for a while to present the petition that you'd been collecting for quite a while now, for people who are passionate about this process being inclusive. So what the hell happened at this meeting?
Well, it was very coincidental, and sometimes things are just a coincidence, but sometimes they're not, and we don't know whether this was timed to coincide with our petition or to get ahead of our petition or just happened to be the way it went, because Joseph has been working on this for quite a while, and they were always aware that it was an issue. I don't know that they were overly concerned with us litigating or just continuing to talk about it, but what happened was, at the last minute, Joseph saw this coming. He thought that there would be a discussion, but at the last minute, we actually saw the policy that was to be voted on. And you never know kind of where these things come from. But with the sunshine laws and laws surrounding local governments, these folks can't sit down and talk about these things in advance. But what they can do is they can tell staff, hey, we want to think about a policy that does this. And they cannot use staff to communicate with one another. So it's hard to know how things would go. Joseph was in communication with the commissioners. Some of them are more interested in talking to him than others. And basically what they decided to do was go back to the way they were 5 years ago today. So they were doing commissioner-led invocations, where the commissioner just says the prayer they want to say, and then they rotate that around. They added to that an option for a moment of silence, because there are some people on the commission who don't necessarily I think don't necessarily want to have a prayer every time, and certainly don't want to say a prayer themselves. So they voted on that. They voted 4-1 on that. There was discussion by the one vote against by Commissioner Colin Sharman to table that and have more conversation about it. And about 10 or 12 people spoke on the issue. And we did a little strategy on whether or not we would do our petition presentation before or after. But anyway, long story short, they voted to return to a previous practice, which we feel, and most of our allies in the national organizations feel, is unconstitutional, which is the government saying prayers at us.
Right. And a couple of things out of that. So we discussed, the invocators have historically been around 95-ish% Protestant Christian invocations. And so that wasn't inclusive to start with. And going back to the commissioners, assuming all the commissioners are Christian, they're going to offer Christian prayers, if not a moment of silence. So there's even less of a pool of a likelihood for there to be any diversity in that moment either. But also, there was some conversation around, one of the commissioners talked about that. Well, the invocations are meant for us. They're meant to, inspire, to evoke these feelings in us, so that we will go forth and lead the people. And so it's not about you public people sitting in the audience. This has nothing to do with you. These invocations are directed at us. They're about us, and so we should be able to do the invocations for ourselves.
Yeah, it's odd, and I think a lot of Choice Edwards from Claremont, who was there on Thursday night and who penned an op-ed or a letter to the editor in the Orlando Sentinel today, which said, you know what, Jesus said, if you're going to pray, you should pray in a closet. Now, right. I don't know that's the same kind of closet where we keep all our clothes and stuff nowadays, but certainly
all the gay people and yeah,
that's right, and all the atheists that aren't out yet.
Yeah, right.
Excellent. So that's where they should be praying, and that's not a commonly known thing, but it's something that Joseph likes to point out as well, and Choice did a good job of that too. But the courts have not decided that this is even permissible. The city manager and the attorney both said, you know what, there's this decision in the Fourth Circuit that says we can do this, and I pointed out in my comments, I said that, and the Sixth Circuit said that you can't. So there's not a Supreme Court decision saying commissioners can lead prayers. Neither the Marsh decision in the 1980s nor the Greece decision 5 years ago says that government officials can lead prayers, and we've held all along that that's not okay, and we talked them out of it one time, and we're working on other places where this is happening as well. So, yeah, if it's for them, Choice pointed out, why don't you just do it before you come in front of all of us?
Yeah.
Do it in the back,
Yeah, that's a great point. So we don't really know where this is going to go from here, right? You guys are probably have gone back to the boardroom to hammer out, okay, what's our next approach? What are we going to do? So I don't expect you to necessarily be able to talk on that. One of the other things that really struck me was I can't remember which news outlet it was I was reading. It might have been the Fox affiliate. Basically made this out to be a Joseph issue, like that this is just this one guy who's rattling the chains and angry about this, and that the citizens of Winter Garden this isn't an issue that they're interested in or care about, and yet all of the evidence shows the opposite, right? Of the petition that you collected. There were hundreds of Winter Garden residents, of the people who spoke at the meeting. Many of them were indeed Winter Garden residents. Some were not, sure. And there was even one gentleman got up and spoke that said that too. That was like, look, all of these people here that are banging this drum, they're not even from here. So why should they have a say?
Yeah, that's one. Saying that it's just about Joseph is moving the argument one step closer to, I guess, meaningfulness. Because all it takes is for one person to have their rights violated for there to be a violation of civil rights.
Yeah.
At the meeting, they were saying these people are from out of town. Well, the fact is that we represent many people across Central Florida. While we don't have a membership that we can say we point to this many people, we have hundreds of people that are paying attention to us on a weekly basis, and a couple of thousand on our email list, and we have several people in Winter Garden. Most are in that damn closet we were just talking about, and aren't going to come out and say, I don't want you praying, because they're trying to run businesses. They have kids in school. They count on us as leaders of these organizations to speak for them. And I don't live in Winter Garden, but guess who does? Joseph Richardson.
Yeah.
Who is speaking on behalf of all of them and himself, and his rights have been violated, and we hold that position today. But what we're going to do, as soon as we find out where that boardroom is, Sarah, if you know where that boardroom is, let me know, because I don't know. But when we get on our Google Hangout next month, we'll be talking about strategy for sure.
Yeah. All right. So then let's move on. And obviously we'll keep an eye on this. As things move forward. The invocation in Polk County went really well, despite some of the comments leading into said meeting about pig's blood and goat's heads.
Goat's heads. I missed that one.
Yeah.
Was that? Did you just throw that one in there, or was that in the news too?
Oh no, that was part of the quote from Commissioner Braswell. Yeah.
Oh. Yeah. Well, if it's not that, it's worshiping trees or eating babies or whatever the trope is to make us less than human, right? We got to be dehumanized so that we can be have our rights trodden upon. But it was fantastic. I think Joseph did a great job with the invocation. I was concerned that he actually treated it like a public comment period. The person presiding over the meeting, I presume was that the mayor or who runs the Polk County Commission there? I don't know, but whoever was in charge of the meeting.
Yeah, that's the commission chairman.
The commission chair, yep. So he basically said Joseph Richardson from the Central Florida Freethought Community has some comments for us this morning, and everybody stayed seated. And I'm sitting here going, but normally he says everybody get off your ass because we're going to pray, and he didn't do that. So it was a little unequal treatment, and we're going to be addressing that as well. While we don't advocate for people being told they need to participate in prayer, equal rights are equal rights, and we should be treated the same as everyone else. But other than that, it was nice to have some media there. It was nice to have, I think there's 7 or 8 people from the community, some from out of town, and many from Polk County. So thanks for being there.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. No, it was great. And those comments and some of the stuff we heard in the aftermath, like all of that just shows why we need to be doing the things that we're doing. Which broadly, yes, we're fighting for church-state separation and we're building community and we're doing all of these things, but undertone of all of that is normalizing atheism in the broader community, so that people understand who we are and what we're about and what our values are and what we do care about and where we do get our morals from, and that we're not eating, babies and pig's blood and goat heads and all of that crazy stuff that people trot out still today. That's just not an accurate representation of who we are. We're your neighbors. We work hard. We pay our taxes. We cut our grass.
This isn't what the Bible says, Sarah. The Bible says that atheists are no good and they're corrupt and vile, and we need to peer review that document if we get a chance.
Yeah, right. Okay, so tell us some more things that you all do there with the Central Florida Freethought Community.
Well, our Invocation project has been a real, I guess, an asset for us because it's allowed us to build a reputation across Central Florida. It was a big kind of news blitz the first couple of years we did it. We've done 76 so far, including one in the Florida House of Representatives with the chaplain from the University of Central Florida, T. Rogers. And so that's been a big part of our program. We've also been embedded in with the Interfaith Council of Central Florida. They've been very gracious in having us along for educational opportunities, for moments of mourning or grieving or celebration with faith leaders. And, a lot of people are wondering why we do that or wondering why we do invocations. Well, these things are going to happen, whether we're there or not. So we have to participate in them. So along with all of that advocacy, we're involved in keeping track of what's going on in Tallahassee. We don't feel like we can do enough about that, and I think we've got a lot of work as organizations to try to get around that. But we stay closely in tune with the Florida Citizens for Science, with Planned Parenthood, with a lot of organizations that have social justice and issues at the front of their agendas that we are caring about as well. And of course, the LGBT community with Equality Florida, they're allies of ours. So we try really hard to make sure that we're forward facing on these issues, pointing our members in the direction of other organizations and allied groups. In addition to that, we're doing social stuff. We have Freethought cafes across Central Florida. So just about every Sunday morning from 9 to 11 o'clock, there's somewhere people can go and hang out and chat. Sometimes that's in the evening, and social, educational, community service. And then tabling is a big part of what we do. We've got events going on 4 or 5 times a year where we table to make sure people know who we are and try to, recruit more help and get people involved in our organization. So a couple of big events that we do. We have a Freethought cruise every winter. This year we had Matt Dillahunty. Next year we'll have Aaron Ra and Lilandra Ra. And we'll be going to the Caribbean. So if people are interested in cruising, they can go to freethoughtcruise.com and find out about that. And so, we're on Facebook and meet up. And, I think we do what a lot of other local communities do. And we have the benefit of a greater Orlando area to pull from. When I was in Sarasota, it was harder. And I'm sure in Polk County, it's going to be harder to pull resources together. So we've been really lucky to have a lot of folks from around Central Florida reaching all the way over to you in Polk, and folks up in Daytona Beach and Volusia and down in Brevard at Melbourne. So anyway, we're doing all the regular things that people should be looking for in their own communities. And what I hear a lot of people saying is look for communities in your area. If you're listening to this and you need a community, you can find one. And if there's not one there, start one.
Yes. I had that conversation with someone just this week. That was wishing, I wish we had one here. Start one. Yes. Yeah. And said the same thing that we led in with. And let me know what you need. Let me know if I can help you figure out, talk to you about the steps, the same conversations that you and I had at the beginning of all of this Polk County group. Here are the things that you need to file for. These are things you need to be thinking about. Yeah, I'll have that conversation with somebody. Sure.
Yep. And you actually turned someone onto our Florida map, so I'll point out to folks that you can find all of the groups that we track just on Facebook Meetup and with the national organization affiliations, and that's at tinyurl.com/FL-Freethought. And we added one the other day because you pointed them to us, the Nocatee Freethinkers, so thanks for that.
Yeah, you bet. Now, I do want to get you or Jocelyn in down here sometime to do a formal, let's talk about free flow, loading into that. And the Freethought Cruise, I think that's great. We're dying to be a part of that one of these years. But you mentioned something else that I wanted to step back into. You talked a little bit about sort of an interfaith coalition And you also, you sort of had some media coverage and presence recently over a friendship that you've developed with a faith leader, and have been having genuine, friendly conversations with about issues that matter, about issues that that you both care about and bring, different experiences to. Why don't you talk a little bit about that?
Sure, sure. So, as part of our work with the Interfaith Council of Central Florida, we were invited, I think, just in general, 3 years ago to a summit, which is, basically a few people on stage and a whole bunch of people in the audience listening, on religious freedom. And of course, my first thought on this was, well, they're talking about Christian religious freedom, not real religious freedom, and they kind of were. Things have changed, though. I think they started with the alarm bells from the religious right saying we've got to start being concerned, but they've really moved in a direction of hey, who else do we need to include here? And our voice as freethinkers, atheists, and humanists, along with other religious minorities, said, you know what, that second one that you did back in 2017 was really very inclusive. In fact, the Beckett Fund was there to talk about the victory in Hobby Lobby and the victory with Neil Gorsuch being put on the court, and and the loss at Obergefell. So it's like, who the hell was she talking to, right? She was talking to a few people in the audience, maybe even half the audience. This event was at a Baptist church, First Baptist Orlando, but the majority of the folks there that were invited on behalf of the interfaith community felt put upon by this, this expectation that they were all in agreement that we should not have these rights, and it's too bad we lost those. And so, long story short, we were asked to provide some feedback directly to a few folks that were involved in the steering of that event, and one of those was Associate Pastor Danny DeArmas at the First Baptist Orlando. He and I got to meet at doing these conversations, and since then have become friends. Now, we're not going to lunch every Wednesday morning, right? But
Sure.
we're staying in touch. In fact, I texted him the other day about the event in Winter Garden, and he told me that their pastor from the local church in Winter Garden was going to be there. So we're in touch on these things, and he cares very much about my understanding of religious freedom, and I care very much about his understanding of religious freedom, even if we don't agree with those things. But I'll tell you this, he's more of a Baptist Joint Committee, Roger Williams kind of separation of church and state Baptist than most of the Baptists that you have this stereotype of in your head. And
Right.
You never know what people think until you get a chance to talk to them. And that's where we did. We talked about it, and we learned that he kind of agrees with me on most everything, which is a bit of a relief. And it's provided an opportunity for him to educate kind of his people on this.
Mm-hmm. When I started looking at, because that was something that when I set forth into this community building thing, I thought, that's another one of those best practices that we want to mirror. Is that religion is not religious people are not the enemy. There are a lot of things. Humanism tells us that we are a whole lot more like than we are different. There are lots of things that we're going to agree on, despite the things that we do disagree on. And it doesn't serve us to make enemies of each other. And so I set out and I was looking up all of the churches in Polk County, right? I pulled up the map and I started clicking on the dots and looking up information about each one of them, and I believe that this is a down level from the national documentation. But as I clicked on these sites, I started seeing this repetition of church-state separation, Baptist church, church-state separation. You click on there, what do we believe in, what are our values, what is our statement of faith, and by and large, most of the Baptist churches in the county on their websites include that statement, which I believe does come from above. But I can work with you. If we can agree on that one thing, then we can work together on that one thing. We can write joint press releases. We can have events together and stand on stages together, despite the fact that we might disagree on whether gay people can be clergy or
Sure.
how you feel about gay marriage. And I'm a queer person. That's something that's like integral to my core. But if we build those relationships, that gives us an opportunity to have those conversations too.
Yeah, absolutely. And I would say that is a great thing that you've done and done that research. But remember that that religious people often don't know what's in their book.
Oh, yes.
And I suspect they don't know what's on their church's website either. So what matters way more than labels like atheist and Baptist
Sure.
is well, what do you mean by separation of state and church? What does it mean to you? And that's one of the things we really drill down into in this Commission on Religious Freedom, which we're a part of in Central Florida, is we're not going to agree on this, but tell me what it means to you, how my privilege impacts your rights, and let's talk about it, right, on a continuing basis, as opposed to going, well, shit, you're just wrong about that. I'll see you on the internet, you know?
Yeah, no, absolutely. And it's and beyond the website, it's reaching out to those people and having that conversation, and that's something that we need to be doing. Absolutely.
Yeah, so we can't assume that because, you know, we see someone's got a label or someone's got a mantra. I mean, you know, the shorter the set of words, the more likely you are to misunderstand it.
Sure.
Right? And the shortest number of words is one. So when I say atheist, you may have no idea what I mean unless you know me.
So now that we're on that, first, we should have done this at the outset. There may be some folks listening who do not know, may have never heard the word freethinker before. Of course, if they've listened to the show, they should have heard it before. But so what is free thought? What is a freethinker?
So free thought is generally, I think colloquially, a lot of people think it means nobody's telling you what to think, right? I mean, that's kind of the where you start from, and that's definitely the case. But I will say that the Freedom from Religion Foundation uses the word free thought, and I tend to like how they describe free thought. And the way they do that is they say that you're not bound by religious dogma in the way that you think or perceive, the doctrine of the church. So you're free from that doctrine. You're free from that dogma. So free thought is generally, related to religious free thought versus just, have an open mind, right? So it's basically being free from the dogma or doctrine of the church, not being told by religious leaders or sure how to think, but being free from that. So that's what it means. And a lot of times people will spell free thinker as two words or free thought as two words, and we generally use that as one word, just as an aside.
All right, that out of the way. Do you want to take a run at the misconceptions and differences between atheist and agnostic?
I do not.
We've been talking about that so much online lately.
Well, I'll say this. As I was looking at a post that was actually on the Polk page today, somebody said, yeah, you can't support atheism in science. And I think, well, if you define atheism as, of course, there's no God, then yes, you cannot use science to get to that, because science doesn't prove that that's not the case. And I think that the terms that we use are evolving, and we have to get into, well, what do you mean by that, versus just saying, oh, well, this person's an atheist, they're saying there's no God. That's pretty, presumptive on their part. I'm not going to give them the time of day. So it's not helpful to say the word atheist right out of the gate. It's really helpful to talk about what you mean by, the labels that we use. In the
same way that when people say I'm a Christian, well, that can mean several things.
Absolutely.
In the same way.
Yeah. It matters what it means to them.
Yep.
And I have my definition of Christian, but I'm almost always wrong when I bounce it off Christians,
Yeah.
So I tend to think of atheism as a belief or non-belief, right? So theism is a belief,
right.
Atheism is non-belief. So it's saying I'm not convinced yet. It doesn't mean I'm saying that I believe there's no God. It's saying I don't have a belief. Just like I don't believe in Bigfoot.
Yep.
I doubt there's a Bigfoot. There's probably not a Bigfoot. But I wouldn't say there's no Bigfoot, right? So that's the atheism part. Agnostic, I tend to like as an adjective. I don't use the word agnostic to describe people as a noun. I use it to say as an adjective. So I am an agnostic atheist, which means I don't know whether God exists or not. Today somebody said, are you an agnostic or an atheist? And I said, yes.
Yes, yeah.
I had to describe to them, and that's great. I get to describe to them what that means to me, because a lot of folks, particularly older generation, older literature, atheist means there is no God. And I think today we use that to mean I don't believe in a God.
Yeah, I would agree. That's the definitions that I use. But if there's anything I've learned from hours and hours and hours on the Street Epistemology YouTube channel, it's let the interlocutor define their terms.
Absolutely.
So,
absolutely.
All right. Well, that covered a lot. Let's get into some news stories, things that are going on in the news. So we here on the show, we've discussed this, the Bible Literacy Act a few times, and I'm happy to share the good news. Hallelujah! The Bible Literacy Act, House Bill 195 here in Florida, did not go through this session. But don't sit down and take a deep breath yet, because they'll be back, and I'm sure our friend Kim Daniels will file it again in some form. So the Bible Literacy Act is a model legislation provided by the Congressional Prayer Caucus Foundation in the Project Blitz playbook, and it's an attempt to put Bible study classes in high schools, and they do this by skirting around various legal issues using crafty language like objective and secular, which is interesting. And I've been beating this drum for a while, but now there are some states that are taking things a few steps further. Indiana and Tennessee have both passed bills that allow public schools to offer academic credit for released time programs. From Americans United for Separation of Church and State, released time programs authorize public school students to leave school property during the school day to receive religious instruction. The Supreme Court has said that these programs may be constitutional if they do no more than accommodate student schedules. The Constitution prohibits these classes from taking place on school grounds, expending public funds on them, and school officials from promoting the program. But now, state legislators are trying to pass laws that do way more than merely accommodate a student's schedule. This new slate of bills would allow public schools to award academic credit to students for attending religious classes. Of course, awarding academic credit for religious instruction promotes and incentivizes students to participate in released time. And as the Supreme Court has repeatedly held, public schools that promote religious instruction are violating the Constitution. Americans United also points out that these classes authorize academic credit for classes that are purely devotional, unlike the Bible Literacy Acts, which typically call for an objective secular course. I haven't. I just.
Are you sick yet? Are you sick yet?
Right? Now, listen. High school me, who was, creating Bible study groups in school and organizing Meet Me at the Polls, I would probably have loved this. I would have jumped all over it.
Well, there's a concern that I have here with, giving school credit for. As Americans United points out so well, attending a class where they have to memorize the Bible or go through a religious rite. I mean, how do they evaluate the teacher performance in that setting, or the actual education that you're getting, right? So it seems odd, and they also go on to point out, which it makes a lot of sense, and this is the case that I make very often when I talk about these issues. And some people say, "Oh, it's great that we have an open conversation and everybody can get engaged in their faith tradition in public square and stuff." Well, the atheists, the Muslims, the Buddhists, we don't have enough damn money or time to be out there with all the people that are preaching on the street corner. We don't have enough time to be putting programs of education together. Hell, I don't even have enough time to get to Tallahassee when they're considering all of these bills. How am I going to start a humanist charter school?
Right.
Or anything else. So non-religious students and other minority faith students are not going to have access to the same courses. So now we're privileging even further the majority faith tradition by saying, you know what, don't wait for Sunday. Get your education Monday through Friday, as part of your high school education. And
sure.
It's such a privilege that they have, and have no idea how it comes across as and affecting religious minorities. So
right, and even if the religious minorities were to find their way into this and take part in it, come on down to the mosque for some prayer time and instruction. As you pointed out, like, boy, wouldn't it be great if, we've talked about this before, if we could just quit our jobs and be activists, humanist, atheist activists full time. But we don't have that. And because so many of our laws are written with religious exemptions, could we be pastors of the atheist community? Like, at what point do those religious privileges shut us out of the game? Well, pretty quickly.
Well, and we should have, if we fight for them, all the rights and privileges of religious clergy as non-religious clergy. I'm according to the state of Florida, an ordained minister of the gospel because I am a humanist society celebrant. In fact, my imam friends and my rabbi friends are ordained ministers of the gospel because they can conduct wedding ceremonies in their faith tradition. And Florida law is written by privileged Christians. So, it boggles the mind. And it also reminds me, too, that, when these release time programs happen, what about the other kids that are there? I mean, there are places today and in history, well-told stories about non-religious and minority religious students being put into a corner or told to wait around for all the other kids to get done with their religious instruction or to do the pledge or to have the prayer. So it's not always the case, but I'm sure it happens a lot more than it's reported that non-religious and other religious minority students are basically just waiting for the Christians to get done with their stuff.
Sure. Well, and we talked about that story in where was it? North Carolina? Elizabeth Deal? Deal was the last name. Her child was they had a Bible study, a Bible class in elementary school, and she and another student were put in a coat closet with an iPad to entertain themselves because they weren't enrolled.
Which is where the Christians
class.
are supposed to be praying.
Yes.
Yeah, I remember the name once you said it, and it looks like a West Virginia Bible class
West
lawsuit.
Virginia, that was it. Yeah, West Virginia.
Yeah, I don't know where the current status is, but there was a Fourth Circuit decision on it if anybody wants to look that up.
And Americans United talked a little bit too about and I didn't save this to include it, but they talked a little bit too about this very thing, right? If depending on your demographic makeup, 90% of the kids sign up for this thing and they go off to do their religious instruction, and you're left with some atheist kids and some Hindu kids and some Muslim kids or whoever's left that doesn't partake in this. They were talking about like these students were basically study halled and not given credit for the time that they were the same block of time that these other students were allowed to go get credit at a church. They were not allowed instruction and couldn't get credit. So yeah, there's violation after violation after violation.
And the real bitch of it is it's the parents that want them to go to the damn religious instruction, not the kids.
Yeah.
except for kids like you. You probably would have enjoyed that, right?
Yeah, I would have loved it. Sure. I was into it deep, man, for a while. I really was. Ugh. All right, so let's move on. This was a good story. This is an interesting story out of Jacksonville. A military chartered plane traveling from Guantanamo Bay to the Naval Air Station in Jacksonville slid off the runway during thunderstorms in the area and landed in a shallow part of the St. Johns River. While 21 people were taken to local hospitals with minor injuries, all 7 crew members and 136 passengers survived. It's a miracle! Praise Jesus! Right?
Yeah.
Well, Jacksonville Fire and Rescue spokesman Tom Francis, hero of the week for me, said this while speaking to the press.
I must say that all things considered, the fact that as I was en route here, I heard that we had no critical injuries. To say that I was wiping sweat off my brow would be, of course, an understatement.
Would you call that a miracle, that there were no serious injuries?
Oh, I
Please call it a miracle.
I don't take that kind of approach to anything. I'm much more of a secular kind of guy.
Tom Russell from Action News Jack.
What a guy.
Please call it a miracle. I want that to be my headline.
Right? Well, and that's the thing. So we've talked about this kind of stuff a million times, right? Give credit where credit is due. If you make it through the surgery, thank the doctors and the nurses and the drug manufacturers and the researchers and all of the things, the pieces that had to come together to make a surgery like that be successful. And in this case, first responders, right, who put their lives on the line all the time to save people, and then we go, Thank God. Thank God for that.
Mhm.
And
Yeah, it's nuts. Are all safe landings a miracle, or just the ones that go horribly wrong?
right.
You know?
Yeah. Well, and that's so the thing about this story that really, like, again, we've talked about that a million times, but the thing about this one that really kind of twisted for me was I've worked in the news media. What the hell kind of question is that?
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
It's a question you ask in the South, I guess. That's
yeah. Well, the media either needs to confirm that God exists or have a good headline.
right.
I guess it's just, well, it was a Friday night, so it could be the case that God just, maybe it was like the air traffic controller, just kind of nodded off or was a little buzzed and, obviously distracted. But it's a good thing he got there in the nick of time to make sure that everything went well.
Right. Got that all taken care of. The
Yeah.
starving, dying children all over the world had to take a back seat for that.
Yeah. Did you get that off of the Friendly Atheist blog or Reddit, or where did you get that one from?
It might have been the Friendly Atheist.
Yeah, I know he covered it. He does a good job. It's a good place to stay tuned in, folks, if you're interested in seeing a snarky take on secular news topics.
I got to tell you, we were shocked to see a hat tip from our friend Hemant Mehta over at the Friendly Atheist in that news story. That was nice to see. Wasn't expecting that. Yeah,
he's a good guy. He's been down for 4 times in the last 8 years here, so he likes to get to Florida.
Well, who doesn't, right? We have beautiful weather and hurricanes and love bugs and yeah.
And Florida Man. Don't forget
Florida Man. Oh, bad news, friends. Becca's in charge of Florida Man now, and as you can see, Becca's not here tonight, so you know what that means, no Florida Man.
Oh, I could do a Florida Man. I probably can't do it a la Becca, but I will pull one out of my pants, so to speak,
There
and
you
will get the joke in a few minutes here.
It's so sad too because normally I cultivate the stories and I write them all up, and this week I've been sending them all to her, and then her allergy head cold thing just took a turn right at the last minute. So, the next story comes from The Root. The small town of Houston, Georgia, according to census data, 84% white and only 3.5% black, was on the hunt for a new city administrator and had narrowed its list down to 4 candidates. But the Atlanta Journal-Constitution reports that one candidate was specifically excluded by the mayor's office, quote, because he is black and the city isn't ready for this. End quote. Mayor Teresa Kennerly reportedly told a member of the city council that she removed Keith Henry, a black man, from consideration, but when asked about the allegations, she said, quote, can't say I said it or not said it, end quote, adding that she could not comment on things that happened in executive sessions. Later, she said in a statement, I do not recall making the statement attributed to me regarding any applicant for the city administrator position. Councilwoman Hope Weeks said the mayor did not make those comments during a closed-door session, and then repeated them in the parking lot. Weeks wrote, she proceeded to tell me that the candidate was real good, but he was black, and we don't have a big black population, and she just didn't think Houston was ready for that. Weeks informed a fellow councilwoman, Susan Powell, and together they took their concerns to the city attorney, Thomas Mitchell. Well, apparently, Mitchell struck a deal with the 5-person council to allow Kennerly to attend the interviews as long as she didn't ask any questions. And
this is the mayor, everybody. This is the mayor.
The mayor. And also warned the council members not to be putting any of this in writing. Wouldn't want your racism on the record now, would we? And don't do that in Florida. Everything's public record. Everything. Councilwoman Jim Cleveland, whose official photo shows him dressed in a flannel shirt and a Harley-Davidson ball cap, said, I don't know how they would take it if we selected a black administrator. She might have been right. Cleveland confirmed Kennerly's statement, saying, I understand Teresa saying that simply because we're not Atlanta. Things are different here than they are 50 miles down the road. Apparently, in Georgia, 50 miles is roughly equivalent to 50 years. And the voices here are not accurate representations of the people involved, but it's Georgia, so I'm taking liberty. Cleveland also explained just how not racist he is by appealing to his faith. Quote, I'm a Christian, and my Christian beliefs are that you don't do interracial marriage. That's the way I was brought up, and that's the way I believe. I have black friends. I hire black people. But when it comes to all this stuff you see on TV, when you see blacks and whites together, it makes my blood boil because that's just not the way a Christian is supposed to live. Who wants to remind Cleveland that Jesus was a Middle Eastern brown Jewish dude?
Was there a wedding proposal at this job interview?
That's what I'm thinking. What does interracial marriage have anything to do with hiring a dude for a position?
I guess it's the nuclear option, you know. You got to say what's on your mind, and that did it.
Yeah, I guess. And we'll finish back in the Root article because it's just fucking brilliant. They end it like this. When asked for comment, Jesus said he had removed the names of Teresa Kennerly and Jim Cleveland from his list of candidates for everlasting life. If you're not following the Root is a great outlet to be following.
So I think I know what you do when you can't fire an elected official. You got to get your governor to do it, right?
Oh.
I mean, it would be there's this Georgia Commission on Equal Opportunity, and I guess they would recommend to the governor. I mean, this is in Florida. This is the governor can do this. So I presume that's what's got to happen in Georgia. Is the governor would say, you know what, y'all don't have this right. But remember, this is Brian Kemp.
Right.
Who hasn't shown himself to be the fairest, accused of voter suppression, which unfairly affects black voters and Democrats, particularly in Georgia. So I'm not sure how much hope there is for this to be settled. Can you imagine the drama on this council? Because apparently some of the other council members are saying, y'all got to go.
Yeah. Well, and Henry withdrew his name from consideration, but on the record is that they wanted him to travel from Houston on his own dime to do all of these interviews and things, and they promised that he would repay him, and he was like, "Yeah, right. never mind. I'm good." Yeah. Here's the thing: if the city is obviously there's. What I'd be interested to see is all of these council folks. How long have they been in this position, or in the governance, or had the support of the public? Like that would be an interesting thing to have had the time to research. But you're right. If the state has an ability to intervene, the likelihood of that is pretty low.
I mean, the consequences of not doing it. I mean, just bring in the courts, and
Mm-hmm.
Roy Moore's not on the court, and that's Alabama actually. So, but I'm sure there's just as much difficulty in the state courts in Georgia. So,
yeah. And finally, tonight in the news, porn. Ah, yes. The old fuck flick, the skin bin, I swear I just read the articles, Curly Mag. We like to think of ourselves as a sex-positive show. Rub it, lick it, flick it, stick it, bop it, twist it, pull it, however you choose to touch yourself, or with enthusiastic consent, someone else, is fine by us. Who do you think, take a wild guess, who do you think is not fine with porn? Yes, the people who studies continue to show consume the most porn have the biggest issues, conservative religious people, specifically in the Bible Belt. And I love that Pornhub publishes their demographic data of who's viewing which porn where, and I think that's just fantastic. You got the South is real high on gay porn and interracial porn, despite your Georgia City Council folks' public statements on the matter.
So I didn't know there was words on Pornhub.
University of Oklahoma professor Samuel L. Perry, sociologist of religion, who I think would be an interesting interview, I'd like to get him on the show sometime. Just published a book called Addicted to Lust, Pornography in the Lives of Conservative Protestants. From the New Yorker, Perry draws on interviews and survey data to show how the availability of internet porn is affecting traditional religious Christians. Focusing on America's Protestant majority, and specifically its pious members, Perry finds that pornography is leading to depression and unhappiness, and it's disrupting marriages and communities. Well, that's fucking easy. We just ban pornography, right? That's the solution. We've talked about states like Arizona working to declare porn a public health crisis. It's clear as can be. Porn is the problem. No, religion is the problem, as usual. In terms of depression, Perry says, what we find is that more often there's a connection between viewing pornography and experiencing depression. But we found it's really only for men who are violating their own moral beliefs when they're viewing it. In other words, it's not necessarily that porn makes you depressed. It's watching porn when you've already said that's an immoral thing and you don't want to do it. That can lead to guilt and shame and makes you feel crappy about yourself, that you are immoral, that you're violating something that's deeply held and sacred. Conservative Protestant women who view pornography, he says, experience this even more than men. Conservative Protestants tend to be what we would call complementarian in their views of gender. They believe that women have certain roles and that men have certain roles, and that they're designed by God in different ways. And a corollary of this idea of complementarianism is that women and men believe that they have different sexual appetites, that men are more physical and more attracted to the visual, but for women, if they are lusting over things visually, if they are looking at things like pornography and masturbating to them or getting turned on, they really feel like an extreme pervert. Conservative Protestant women are twice as likely to divorce their husbands because of this pornography use. And it's not because their husbands are looking at porn any more often than non-conservative Protestant husbands. It's because they draw a hard line, and they consider pornography use not just analogous to, but literally adultery, or betrayal, or perversion. And so the consequences of pornography use for their relationships are extreme compared to consequences for anyone else's relationships. And the advice that I was going to append to the end of this story, Perry himself provides almost exactly as I would. People need to talk about it. They should be open with their partners and spouses about, hey, here's something that I'm kind of attracted to. What do you think about this? Can we talk about why you don't like that? In a way that's healthy and constructive, rather than ultimatums and blowing up and drawing hard lines, that kind of thing. And I think that applies to all sorts of things in a relationship, really. That not talking thing goes far beyond conservative Christians, though I wonder if some of us outside that circle who have similar communication issues, I wonder if that doesn't stem from our upbringing in such conservative Christian circles. That would be an interesting thing to study, I think.
I'm sorry. Were you talking? I was on Pornhub. No doubt. I find myself thinking about drugs, race, sex in ways that remind me of how my parents and their parents would have thought about them, and it's been a change over my life and how I think about all these things, and it absolutely relates to that indoctrination from childhood.
Yeah, I'm gonna rant about abortion in the second half of the show here, and that's another one of those things that I think we've talked about on the show before. I was like 17, got a girl pregnant, and her parents took her without my involvement or knowledge to St. Louis to have an abortion done. And at the time, I was fairly religious, and I was, I looked at this as like, we have a responsibility to have this child, and we are going to have to get married, and we're going to have to raise this baby, and this is just how things have to be. Hindsight being what it is, things that I've learned over all of these last 40 years, I'm actually thankful that that was the process that took place, that's the decisions that were made, that's what happened, because when I imagine what my life might have been like had I followed what I thought was the right thing to do at the time based on a pretty conservative Christian upbringing, it's not great.
Yeah, no doubt. I hear stories a lot. In fact, one of the best parts about the community building we do is hearing people talk about that, and talk about it sometimes for the first time with other non-believers. So, I mean, it's mind-blowing to those of us who were raised secular to hear about these things. And I've heard a lot of stories, and they're very traumatic to hear about, and I can't even imagine coming from that type of background. So when you talked about that when you were up here in Central Florida Freethought Community, it's hard to listen to, but you made it funny, so I appreciate that.
Oh yes, my hometown was a special place. In the chat here, Rachel and/or Keith says couples need to watch porn together. And now there's an interesting part of this article that I didn't include that sort of touches on that, which was, and I should have included it because it's potentially the funniest part, where he talks about, for Christians, like, is masturbation bad? And in this particular carve out of Protestant folks, there's a context, right? Masturbation is not necessarily bad. It's the stimulation, it's the imagery that makes it bad. And so he suggested, like, for a potential imaginary Protestant couple, let's say, you have to give a sperm sample at the doctor's office for fertility testing. Well, you can't take the Playboy in with you. You have to, if you pull up a picture of a naughty picture of your wife on your phone and beat off to that, well, then that's okay under this sort of conservative Christian view of masturbation. How
do you know that? I mean, is there like a book on what you can and can't masturbate to?
Yeah, sure. It's in the Bible, right? I'm sure it's there. Nobody's read it. We wouldn't know. The other example that he gave was, if let's imagine this imaginary Christian man is stationed overseas in the military, and all of his buddies are looking at porn and beating it, and he's going to have urges. He's there for God knows how long. Similar idea, if the wife provides racy images of herself so that he can use those to masturbate, then that's okay. Like, they make that, engineer that to be okay in the worldview. Any other touching yourself, stop it.
But I mean, somebody's got to review the pictures to make sure they're not too racy, though, also, right?
Right, yeah.
Is that a third party? I mean, is there a pastor in charge of that at the church?
Yeah, right. Eventually that'll be AI. You just throw that through the Google porn filter, and it'll tell you whether it's okay or not. All right, well, that's what I have in the news. I'm going to bitch about abortion here in the next segment, so stick around for that.
And I can do a Florida man story too at some point. So if you want me to wrap through that now or do that after, whichever you like, this will only take a minute.
You're welcome to stick around through my rant if you like.
Oh, I'm going to hear that.
Entirely up to you.
Yeah.
If you want to stick around, you can. I'm fine with that. All right. Yeah, let's keep you on. Let's do that.
Okay.
I think that's a good idea.
I will not be interrupty. I will try to measure my interruptions.
No, it's all right.
I don't know how Becca does it. I mean, how do you know when to lay into a good one-liner or leave it be?
It's so interesting. We have, this is a relationshipy thing, I'm sure, and we've been doing this for 4 years now. But I think, at least listening back when I'm sober, we just have a good chemistry that she just knows, and that's a radio thing, that comes with hosting with somebody for a long period of time. You just find that groove, and you just know how to play off of each other, and that's why when the show. When she said to me tonight, like, I don't think I'm going to be able to do the show. I can't stop coughing long enough to talk, let alone, like, be interesting. And I was like, shit, the show that's just me and a microphone bitching is not nearly as good as it is when you're here or when there's at least somebody else to play off of, like. Yeah. So, anyway.
You sound like you're just doing an audiobook when you're by yourself.
It does. Yeah, it does. I don't know. It's me reading the script. Yeah, very much. And not much debate and banter. All right, so let's do this. Let's throw to a quick break here. And when we come back, we'll talk about abortion and bitch about that for a little bit. Stick around. We'll talk about that and more with our guests, David Williamson, right after this. You're listening to Sarah Talk.
Hello, my friends. This is Sister Mary Atheist of the Church of Religious Avoidance down here in Bumblefuck, Alabama. Now, my friends, my people, my brothers and sisters, do you feel lost? Do you feel that swelling urge to be a part of something better? Well, let the word of SarahTalk help you. If you've never known the word SarahTalk, learn it, live it, love it. Can I get an amen? No? Good, 'cause we don't do that shit around here. My friends, we must all remember that the good word of SarahTalk doesn't happen for free. So get yourself over to patreon.com/SarahTalk and help us spread the word. Plant that seed and help it grow into secular, peer-reviewed empirical evidence for the good of all. In the name of the Sarah, the Becca, and the science-based podcast, amen. Hallelujah and holy shit.
Are you ready for your first card? As I look at the set I placed down for you, I see an interesting things rising. Some of it has to deal with love and money and changes, and hopefully they're going to be for the better. Now your first card represents your situation, maybe some problems you've been having, maybe a little bit about yourself. Your first card is sorrow. This card is letting us know that there is some type of disruption in your life. Not that it's a big deal, but this card is giving off a strange vibe of anxiety. Actually, this card is warm in my hand. Oh, now caller, if you listen here, I'm seeing in the cards. Oh, yes, the 45 of mangoes. The 45 of mangoes card says you're going to go onto Patreon and subscribe because there is nothing better than giving when receiving. What will you ask me? Find out now and I see for you. Call me now for a free tarot reading.
You let Jesus into your heart. Now it's time to bring him into your home with Flat Jesus. Take photos of Flat Jesus in questionable situations and share with the hashtag FlatJesus. Flat Jesus comes in 4 fun styles. Color your own Jesus, historically accurate brown Jesus, TSA approved white Jesus, and everybody's favorite, white Republican Jesus with American flag, assault rifle, and bald eagle accessories. But don't wait, apostates. Download your very own Flat Jesus right now at SarahTalk.com/Jesus. That's SarahTalk.com/Jesus now for your free Flat Jesus. The Bible says the earth is flat. Maybe Jesus was too.
Hey, this is Morgan Stevenson tuning in from Kalamazoo, Michigan at the Sarah Talk podcast.
Welcome back to Sarah Talk. I am Sarah Austin in the studio, and I have on the horn with me David Williamson from the Central Florida Freethought Community. Before we get into the next set of stories and just catch up on the chat here, Rachel says, growing up as a JW, you can't even masturbate or especially watch porn. Religion makes you feel dirty. it leads to a perversion and unhealthy view of sex. I would agree. David says, I once heard a man proudly say the only time he touched his penis was to pee. What a sad life that must be. If you have a penis, feel free. Please touch it.
Right now?
You're not on video on the stream, so, I mean, whatever, man. Your kink is not my kink, but your kink is okay. Victoria says, if I was religious, I'd want to be in charge of determining what porn is allowed or not. I'm already an experienced expert on the subject. All right, so before we get into the final segment tonight, we want to thank our wonderful patrons. This show would not be possible without the people who support the show financially. I just had to buy a new computer because the hard drive was dying on the old one, to the point where I would turn it on, and it would tell me that there was no bootable hard drive, and so then I would turn it off and wait, and turn it back on, blue screen, turn it off, turn it back on, blue screen, and eventually it would go enough to do a show, or to edit or do whatever it was I was doing, but it's super fucking annoying, and the writing was on the wall that it was about to die. So thank you for supporting the show financially. That helped us purchase a new computer for the studio. And a special shout out to our top patrons. Part-time patron Russell, El Investigador Oficial de Internet para SarahTalk, and Sheep. I love sheep. Oh, God, you guys are great. And you're welcome to change your Patreon name every week, and we'll read it on the show and have a good laugh. For as little as $1 an episode, you can join our great patron family at patreon.com/SarahTalk, or you can support the show for free by leaving a 5-star review on Apple or Google Podcasts, or wherever you listen to the show. And definitely, please share out the episodes that you love so that your family will know what you're up to. All right, so our main topic tonight, if it doesn't seem like it, all of that church-state stuff seemed like the main topic. But this is the one I'm really pissed about. Abortion. You couldn't possibly have missed this news out of Georgia. In the first few months of 2019, Mississippi, Kentucky, and Ohio all passed heartbeat abortion bans. Several other states are pushing theirs forward. Now Georgia's legislature has passed, and Republican Governor Brian Kemp just signed, easily the most restrictive and extreme abortion bill ever passed. Of course, we know fetal heartbeat laws ban abortion after a fetal heartbeat is detected, thus the name, which can be as early as 6 weeks, well before many women even know that they're pregnant. But this law takes things to the extreme. It also makes fetuses and embryos legal persons at all stages of development. All of this is an effort to achieve the prophecy sold to the pro-forced birth advocates, many of them coming from a religious perspective, of course, that abortion is murder, which is not a position that I subscribe to. It also includes provisions for alimony, child support, and even income tax deductions for fetuses, declaring that, quote, the full value of a child begins at the point when a detectable human heartbeat exists, which the bill's author, Republican Representative Ed Setzler, said would result in a $10 to $20 million loss in tax revenue for the state annually. It says that fetuses, quote, shall be included in population-based determinations from now on, like the census, because they are legally humans and residents of the state. This legal personhood stuff carries some more shocking side effects, too. Slate reports that Georgia appellate attorney Andrew Fleischman has pointed out, quote, the moment this bill takes effect on January 1, 2020, the state will be illegally holding thousands of citizens in jail without bond. Because, under this law, pregnant inmates' fetuses have independent rights, including the right of due process. Can a juvenile attorney represent an inmate's fetus and demand its release? If not, why? If an inmate's fetus is human, how can Georgia lawfully detain it for a crime it did not commit. It seems as though they didn't really think this all the way through. And so, terminating a pregnancy equals murder, except the bill states that removing, quote, a dead unborn child caused by spontaneous abortion and removing an ectopic pregnancy shall not be considered abortion. Then it says that abortions may still be performed between heartbeat and 20 weeks gestation if there is a medical emergency, if the pregnancy is medically futile, or if the pregnancy, quote, is the result of a rape or incest in which an official police report has been filed alleging rape or incest. Those babies, apparently, are fine to murder, according to the new law. Now, medical emergency is defined as a condition in which an abortion is necessary in order to prevent the death of the pregnant woman or the substantial and irreversible physical impairment of a major bodily function of the pregnant woman. Medically futile means that in reasonable medical judgment, an unborn child has a profound and irredeemable congenital or chromosomal anomaly that is incompatible with sustaining life after birth. Of course, this begs the question, who determines what a substantial and irreversible physical impairment of bodily function of the pregnant woman is? Who determines which congenital or chromosomal anomalies are incompatible with sustaining life after birth? How long after birth? Hours, days, weeks, 1 month, 2 months? So what they have seemed to have done here is to define fetuses into personhood, making abortion murder, but then granting special privilege to commit that murder if you're like 9 or 10 weeks along and the pregnancy was a result of rape. Please explain to me how this makes any sense at all. Do you want to weigh in?
I wasn't prepared for this, Sarah. I was letting you go. No, it's difficult having not had the I guess the upbringing around the issue, not having had friends talk about it. I feel very ignorant of it, but I've learned a lot in the last 10 years of activism, and I really have appreciated the opportunities to work alongside Planned Parenthood, to talk to my wife and other women about these decisions that, you know, you have to make, and the, not even having the religious dogma, it's fucking hard, you know?
Yeah. Victoria says, are you fucking kidding me? So if an immigrant is pregnant, is the fetus a citizen? Can she start collecting child support? Are they counted in the census? All very good questions that no one has thought through. And if you couldn't imagine it possibly getting any worse, it does. The law criminalizes the women who seek out unlawful abortions or terminate their own pregnancies. So once the law takes effect, the woman who terminates will have, as a matter of law, killed a human, thereby committing murder. The penalty for that crime in Georgia is life imprisonment or capital punishment. And if a Georgia resident plans to travel elsewhere to obtain an abortion, she may be charged with conspiracy to commit murder, punishable by 10 years imprisonment. And if you help your pregnant friend in Georgia plan the trip out of state or transport her to the clinic, you may also be charged with conspiracy.
Wow. So they're outlawing the organizations that are there to help women through these difficult times.
Indeed. Wow. And yes, we are outraged at this garbage law, but make no mistake, this is a direct effort to challenge Roe v. Wade. States are passing these restrictive abortion bans knowing that lawsuits will be filed, or some judges will issue injunctions, opening the pathway to bring the case for banning abortion back to the now conservative Supreme Court in hopes of weakening or overturning Roe completely. Ruth Bader Ginsburg, I swear to God, you better live to fight this one.
All the atheists are praying.
Yeah, for all the good it does. And as we always point out, dear conservative Christian, if you're listening, if you're going to force women to carry to term by criminalizing abortion, then you better be prepared to pay your taxes and stop cutting funding to Medicare and WIC and food stamps and all of the social programs that support the child that you're demanding be born into the world. Better still, how about we just stop telling women what the fuck to do with their bodies? But meanwhile, in Alabama, an extremely restrictive abortion ban passed in the House, 74-3, because, after all, it is Alabama. Democrats walked out during the discussion of the bill to hold a press conference. And when it came time to vote, many of them refused to vote at all in protest. Not that it would have mattered if they did vote, given that Republicans hold 76 of the 104 seats. That bill, sponsored by Republican Representative Terry Collins, had considered a proposed amendment by the Democratic House Minority Leader that would have added exceptions for rape and incest, but that amendment was rejected by a vote of 72-26. Collins said that she did not want to change the bill in any way because she specifically wanted it to stand as a direct challenge to the Supreme Court's decision in Roe. Quote, "My goal with this bill is to let the Supreme Court possibly revisit that decision on just the issue they made in that decision, which was, is that baby in the womb a person?" End quote. So there you have it, from the horse's mouth. All of this stuff is about overturning Roe. And they have set themselves up for conservative majorities in courts at every level. And I think you'll see this. I think you'll see this come to them.
Yeah, and we still find ourselves fighting about which Democratic candidate is the worst.
Oh my God! Don't even get me started on it. Here's my official. I will repeat my official 2020 registered Democrat position. Pick your favorite for the primary. Do you like Bernie Sanders? Do you like Liz Warren? Pick your favorite. Call bank for them. Canvass for them. Talk to people about why you like them, right? But let's talk about why your candidate is the best candidate and not why this other candidate is shit, right? And then, whoever gets the nomination in 2020, be prepared to line up and go vote for that person, whoever it is, because, again, a pet rock would be better than another 4 years of either Donald Trump or any Republican leadership that could possibly come up.
Yeah.
That's my official, unofficial, official position on how Democrats need to consider this election. And I think I may have explained this before, but this, I think, is a difference in the way many progressive people consider authoritarianism, right? What we saw in 2016 with the wide field of Republican candidates, when one would drop off, the people who were lined up behind that candidate moved around and lined up behind another candidate, right? When crazy Ben Carson dropped out, the people who were behind Ben Carson moved over to weird Ted Cruz or Donald Trump or whoever. And at the end, after all of the drops happened, everybody was lined up behind whoever that candidate was going to be, regardless of how garbage they were. Well, we don't tend to value authoritarianism. We don't tend to back to your definition of free thinking. You know, we don't want to be told what to do and what to think, and we just don't think that way. That's just not how our brains function. But if you want to win an election, what we have to realize, I think, is that the worst Democrat for the things that we're interested in, for the things that we care about, will be better than the best Republican. That's my position.
Right, and there's a lot to that, and I don't disagree with anything, but I will say that the real conversation needs to be had around what you mean by winning.
Sure.
Because there are so many people who gauge winning not as having the best of two candidates, in most cases Republican and Democrat, making decisions for minorities, for women, for children and education and secularism. It's not measuring winning is not the blue candidate in the minds of a lot of people, and that's fine. They're free to decide how to define winning. But when we gloss over the idea of winning means putting a Democrat in office and forget about the conversations about the values of that candidate, that's an important conversation. But I gotta say, when the shit's done, you got the chocolate and you got the vanilla. The fucking strawberry is not in the store. So either we're not going to have ice cream or you're going to get, the wrong ice cream flavor. So pick the ones that you have and redefine what you mean by winning at each step of the way. And that's what you were saying about the Republicans. And in fact, the Democrats, the same way. The candidates did that, and they told their followers to do that, but they didn't all do it. And they're free not to, but they're free to have the fury and wrath of all of us that are complaining about how this has turned out.
Yeah, I think there's just this toxic sort of expectation that there's a perfect candidate out there, or that the candidate I like is the perfect candidate. And if that candidate doesn't get through, then fuck you all. I'm going to write in Bernie fucking Sanders and, light the place on fire and call it a day. And that's not the solution to the problem.
Or that there's actually some results coming from third-party candidates that are going to push us forward. So as much as I want there to be 3, 4, 5 good candidates in the election in November, we're not going to get that. So we need not ask for that strawberry. We need to have the chocolate and the vanilla, and we need to figure out which one's better of the two flavors. Once we're there, we don't have the option to say, well, we really need a strong third party. That's done.
Yep. Check out Represent Us if you haven't already. That's a organization, a group that I've been following. That they are fighting to end the corruption in politics. We need to get money and lobbyists and billionaire donors out of our political system. And if that means going to publicly funded campaign finance policies where every candidate gets X amount, depending on what level of race they're running in, so that the playing field is level and special interests can't come in and buy their votes. They're doing a lot of work around educating. I just shared a video today that I know I've shared before, but it's so fascinating, that shows on a graph the likelihood of a bill to pass compared to the public support for that bill. And what they found was, regardless of how the public feels about it, it has about the same percentage chance to be passed in Congress. Now, what you would hope is, if there's a 0% public interest, that it would have a 0% chance of passing in the legislature, and that line grows up the graph to 100%. It should be a straight shot from 0 to 100. But that's not what actually happens. They run at about 30% according to their data. Regardless of who's interested in it, it's generally about a 30% chance that the legislature is going to support it, even if there's a high percentage of the public that wants it to pass. Then when you layer on the line that shows the interests of the billionaires and the special interests and the lobbyists, the people that have political...
That are paying for the ones that are paying for the laws that we have.
Yeah.
To get passed.
Yeah. The political influencers tend to get what they want. And that's a problem. And so this is a thing that they're working on, where that, if you're in the legislature now and you're being courted by lobbyist groups saying, hey, well, when your term ends, you come be a lobbyist for us and billions of dollars in your pocket, they're not going to vote against their own interests, which says a lot about the people that we've elected, I think. I think that, if integrity means anything to anybody, I want my representatives to say, I don't give a shit what you want. I'm trying to do the best thing for my constituents and be honest and true about that. But that's not what we have.
think that's going to take AI. I really do. I'm not a student of this, but I will say that I think, it seems an insurmountable task to bring money out of this.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, it does. It seems like a huge undertaking that is very unlikely to happen because the people who need to vote on it are the people who benefit from it. Right.
Right. And we need robots going to Tallahassee and going to DC to do our bidding in a true democracy, right? Not that all the bugs have been worked out of that plan of mine, but
right.
Run with that, somebody.
And there's an interesting moment in this process that I have often thought about, which is, I challenge people, if you care about a thing, run for office, right? Even if you're running for a political office with the best of intentions, that you want to do things that will benefit the people that you represent, that will that match your values, and then when you get there and the people start knocking on your door with literally billions of dollars in their hand, how easily many are so corrupted by that offer of, hey, you want to win your re-election campaign? All you have to do is vote for this bill. That kind of stuff just blows my mind. It really does.
I think most everybody is susceptible to the power that comes with that. I mean, I think most everybody who's run for office is starting out with I want to do some good. And people change. We all change. Our motivations change throughout life. And I can certainly fault people who have gone through that change, but I can't say that it might not happen to me. I sure as hell like to think it wouldn't, But
right, but you just don't know.
And I'm not trying to make excuses for folks, but I know something that people are talking about is term limits, so that you can't have a career in Congress followed by a lot of work in lobbying. But it's as much as I don't like the conspiracy theorists who talk about follow the money, the fact is if you follow the money in politics, you'll figure out where the work's getting done.
Yep, absolutely. Yeah, I have a tortured opinion about term limits too. I kind of see the both sides of it, where if you don't have an experienced lawmaker who will play in the legislative branch, if every 2 years you're churning over, or 4 years you're churning over a fresh batch of freshmen that aren't familiar with the process really, I get that there's a thing to that. At the same time, I understand that, you maybe having someone in that position for 30 years is not a great thing either. And you can point to examples of people who I would probably point to Bernie Sanders, who has spent his entire damn career politically, who tends to line up with most of my values. And I would hate to see that dude term limited because he does fight for the things that I care about. And if you go back and look at his videos from like the 70s and 80s, he's been fighting for it the whole time.
Right, and I don't discount that at all. It is an anecdote, and you realize that, and I'm not saying it doesn't mean we shouldn't talk about it. But how many Bernie Sanders haven't been able to serve because we only had Bernie Sanders serving?
Sure, no, absolutely. Right? Yeah.
And, I mean, right now we've really got basically a bunch of old white people telling us what to do from on high in the capitals, and we need younger, more colorful people involved in this process, and I think we'll see a lot more going on. So there's a benefit to the term limit just simply in the generation that get elected and how often and how long. So like I said, I'm not a student of this, but I like the conversation and I like to learn about it. Yeah,
it's definitely interesting. All right, well, we got way off the track there. Let's go back to Alabama. Why you would want to, I don't know.
No, it's not.
The Alabama Senate floor erupted into chaos this week as the companion bill to this abortion bill was being considered in the Senate. They delayed a vote on that bill, kicking the can down the road to next week. The Senate bill had provisions for rape and incest added by the Senate Judiciary Committee before coming to the floor. This week, the Senate abruptly removed that exception from the bill without allowing a roll call vote. Before Democrats could get a word in edgewise or hold up the required 3 hands required to call a roll call, the bill's Senate sponsor, Republican Clyde Chambliss, motioned to the table to table the motion before anyone could demand a roll call vote. And so the senators take the weekend off, calm the fuck down maybe, get their shit together, and come back next week and unfortunately pass this thing anyway. According to the Associated Press, Senate Minority Leader Democrat Bobby Singleton said, "You've got the supermajority. You can pass any bill you want. You've got 27 men over on the other side ready to tell women what they can do with their bodies. You can do that if you want to. You don't have to procedurally just try to run over us." End quote. But the maneuver they were trying to do by passing the roll call vote assured that they could strip the rape and incest amendment from the bill without having to put their names under the yay column for history to remember. The House version passed, maybe even more restrictive than Georgia's law, as it would mean doctors who perform an abortion would face felony jail time up to 99 years if convicted. The only exceptions are for a serious health risk to the pregnant woman or a lethal anomaly of the fetus. Unlike Georgia's ban, the Alabama House version has no exceptions for rape or incest, and a woman would not be held criminally liable for having an abortion. The Senate will take this up again Tuesday, likely using their Republican supermajority to ram the bill through, which will then most definitely be signed into law by Republican Governor Kay Ivey, woman Kay Ivey, pro-life Christian woman who ran radio ads talking about her faith, love of God, scripture reading, and Christian values, Kay Ivey. Fucking vote. I think this all comes down to vote, vote, vote.
Yeah, I don't know how to even put the words together to explain how important it is for people to vote, even if they don't care, because they probably are going to guess right.
Yeah.
If we could just get more fucking people to the polls.
Yeah, absolutely. Yes. And I've said, engage with people who appear to be apathetic. Right. I spent my 20s completely apathetic to politics. I wasn't interested. I worked in talk radio, right? And my shtick on the show was the stupid 19-year-old kid who didn't know shit about shit, wasn't interested, wasn't involved, and they were always trying to play it was conservative talk radio, right? So they were always trying to play this, voting is a right, and you need to go vote, and it's so super important that you. And at the time, I dismissed it because I was 20 and didn't give a fuck. And I see that a little bit differently now. But there are apathetic people who just don't care. And a lot of that is because all of the shit that you see in the media that, I have an interview tomorrow that I'm going to do on another podcast. And if the question comes up of like, hey, let's talk about things that are going on with the Trump drama and all of the administration stuff, I'm so checked out of that. I have been following it. And then, like, the Mueller report released, and I was just like, okay, I'm burnt out. And political burnout is a serious thing, too. Like, yeah. I can't keep up with all the moving pieces. There's so many things that happen from one day to the next. Like, how do you stay on top of it all? So I understand that people look at that and go, ugh, why would I care about that? Or they don't have a pet issue that's their particular interest, or whatever their reasons are. Mm-hmm. And if you can have a conversation with those people, right, it goes back to the sort of street epistemology and asking people genuine questions to understand where they come from. Maybe we can help them understand that there is something that they care about, and that translates politically, and this is why you need to get involved and be active.
Yeah, I think we talk about how to convince people of things. In particular, what comes to mind is religion. When we're not allowed to try to convince people they're wrong about religion, but when we talk about religion, there are atheistic approaches to the conversation, and there are humanistic approaches to the conversation. And I think some of you know what I mean, some of you don't. But the idea is there's a right way and a wrong way for every conversation, and it's not always the same way. So every person has an issue that matters to them, and we really have to find out what those issues are and make it matter to them. But doing that one at a time is really hard. But what I will say is we are we are mostly so focused on what Trump did today.
Right.
And what Marco Rubio, or Rick Scott, or who, these people which we have almost zero influence on is who we know. And the people that we have the most influence on, no idea. How many people listening right now know who your state representative is, your state senator is, your council person is, your mayor is? Those are the people who will actually have lunch with you if you make the effort in many cases. So yeah, we've got to really be focused on what we can do locally, way more than what we can do nationally, because it is going to be a deterrent if you continue to think that Donald Trump doesn't care about me. Well, you're right. He doesn't care about himself, it seems. But we know that people locally can have an influence on their local politic, and I think that's where we really have to remember that there's work to be done.
Absolutely. I think that's a good place to leave it. Why don't you wrap it up with just a quick reminder of where folks can follow the Central Florida Freethought and find out all of the things that you folks are doing with your community?
Yeah, sure. So we're on the web, on Facebook, on Meetup at CFL Freethought. So CFL for Central Florida, CFL Freethought. You can find out more about the Freethought Cruise at freethoughtcruise.com. You can actually see our Invocations Online project at invocationsonline.com. Not every one of those is up to date, but it's a place where we've kind of graphed the performance of invocations across many of the Central Florida venues. And lastly, I'll say that the Florida Humanist Association is another organization that I'm part of, and we have a biennial conference called Free Flow, FREEFLO, and that's coming up November 1st, 2nd, and 3rd in Orlando. And you can find out more about that on Facebook as well as online at freeflow.org. So it's been a lot of fun, Sarah. Thanks so much for having me.
Well, before we go, I'm going to have you pitch a Florida man story to us.
Oh, yeah. Great. Well, I'm glad we had time. So this is one that I heard and actually put on the Free Flow Facebook page. So some of you may have seen this. This was from the Miami Herald, 3:30 Monday morning, May 6th. 3:30 a.m. Monday morning, May 6th, Charlotte County Sheriff's deputies were stationed on Tamiami Trail. And for those of you not from around these parts, that's U.S. Highway 41. They were conducting traffic enforcement when they spotted a blue pickup truck that didn't stop at a stop sign. The deputy asked for the driver's license, registration, and insurance card. The driver, Michael Clemens, told deputies that he and his passenger, Ariel Macon-Le-Cayer, were trying to collect frogs and snakes from under the overpass. That's what we do on on
in your free time
Monday
in Florida.
3:30. Yeah,
right. Yeah, sure.
I was down there too at the same time. It's a good thing they didn't stop me. The deputy asked permission to search the bags in the truck to make sure, quote, they did not collect any wildlife they were not supposed to have. That's what the deputy wrote in the report. So Clemens consented. All of his bags had clothes and personal items, the deputy said, and then Macon-Le-Cayer, she gave permission for them to search her backpack, which was on the floorboard near her. She opened the backpack that was on the passenger's floorboard and revealed 41 small turtles, the deputy wrote in the report. They asked the woman if she had anything else on her, and they were not expecting what she did next. She proceeded to pull a foot-long alligator out of her yoga pants and placed it into the bed of the truck. The Florida Fish and Wildlife Commission was called to investigate. It is not immediately clear if Clemens or, I'm going to get the name right this time, Macon-Le-Cayer were charged. So Florida woman takes it for the win this week.
Wow, that is the most possible Florida story there is. I'll share one too. This was my favorite. I think I shared this today too. A man spotted standing in the open sunroof of a moving vehicle faced charges after an off-duty Hillsborough County Sheriff's deputy recorded video as he drove by, according to Florida Highway Patrol. It happened Tuesday afternoon in Polk County on Interstate 4. The trooper caught up with the Cadillac on US 98 and conducted a traffic stop. The driver, 70-year-old Leonard Olson Jr. of Lakeland, was identified as the man in the off-duty deputy's video. FHP trooper Ricky Benet wrote in his report that he told Olson he received reports of a man fitting his description sitting in the sunroof while traveling on I-4. Olson allegedly replied, "I don't know about that." Mr. Olson stated that he wanted to turn himself in to an official and asked if he could turn himself in to me. When asked, "Why do you want to do that?" Mr. Olson stated, "My wife treats me like a servant, and she's the mistress, and I'm tired of this expletive, I assume shit." The report states, adding, Mr. Olson also stated, "Lock me up. I'd rather go to jail than go back home." Olson was detained and later admitted it was him sitting in the sunroof of his vehicle while cruise control was activated, the report states. Olson also allegedly told the trooper, "The car drives itself," and he thought it would be a nice way to praise God for a minute. Olson was charged with misdemeanor, reckless driving. Jesus, take the wheel.
Yes, that was a lot of fun.
God, what a great story.
We saw it last night as we were going to bed, but the God part was not part of it yet. So we were really thrilled today to get up and be able to make the jokes about God is my co-pilot. Jesus, take the wheel. Jesus, where'd you go?
Yeah.
Jesus.
What's the other one? Only drive as fast as your angel can fly, or something like that. All the bumper stickers, right?
That's right. Well, the picture is great. The picture is great. When I first saw it, I thought it was Joseph Richardson because it looks like him from behind. But he's actually sticking out of the car.
It's kind of a blurry photo, yeah. But
it's good.
But I see where you get that. Yeah.
It's got the crucifix going.
Yeah. Well, hey, again, thank you for jumping in at the last minute here and emergency co-hosting. I appreciate that. Let's do it again sometime.
It was a lot of fun. Maybe with more prep time on this end, but I enjoyed it.
Sure.
The stories were great. So,
yeah.
thanks.
Yeah, and let's get you down in the studio. Or I need to figure out how the hell to patch Skype into the live stream so that people can see you.
That'll be a shorter trip. Either way.
Yeah, right. It is kind of a haul all the way out here to Polk County. All right. Well, thank you so much. We'll chat with you again soon, I'm sure. All right. That's going to do it for this episode of SarahTalk. We want to thank again David Williamson of the Central Florida Freethought Community for guest hosting at the last minute. Thank you all for listening. Thanks to the patrons for patroning. Thanks to Tom Francis for being openly secular in the media. And of course, thanks to porn! We'll see you next week on Facebook Live. You've been listening to SarahTalk.
SarahTalk is made possible by listener support. Visit patreon.com/SarahTalk to become a patron and help keep this program going. Contact Sarah and Company by email at producer@sarahtalk.com or call 224-40-SARAH. That's 224-407-2724. And follow us on social media, facebook.com/SarahTalk Radio and on Twitter @SarahTalk Radio. SarahTalk is a production of Sarah Austin Media.